when you start a company, about 100% of the complexity of the organization sits in the technology.
Hello, this interview is designed to dive deep into the entrepreneur's journey, uncovering not just the successes, but also the challenges, the strategic decisions, the mindset that define their path to scaling. Today I have the privilege to have Peter Platzer. Hello,
Welcome.
Peter. Thank you for being with us. So Peter is a physicist, worked at CERN, he's a Harvard MBA, consultant at BCG, he's been a quant researcher and portfolio manager on Wall Street before going back to school at the International Space University and starting his company. But I must add, he's also a singer, so quite an accomplished person we have today. Thank you again, Peter, for being with us.
My pleasure, really.
So Peter is also the founder and CEO of Spire Global, a highly successful space company focused on the future of planet Earth. Spire sells space data and analytics and operates the world's largest multi-purpose satellite constellation. With Expon Capital, we invested into Spire in 2017 when the company generated $1 million in revenues. And for 2023, Spire made $105 million in revenues. And the ambition was, and I guess remains, to surpass $1 billion a year at some point into the future, Peter. So Peter, this makes you exceptionally well placed to convey insights on the process of scaling up a tech company. Let's start. Understanding the growth mindset and leadership style is what we're going to start with right now. So tell me, Peter, at what point did you realize that your product, market fit, was strong enough to start focusing aggressively on scaling?
So I think when Jeff Bezos says the result of this quarter was baked in 3 years ago, the same thing is true when you think about scaling. So you need to set up your runway, your machinery, way in advance. Because when you try to build your plane while it's flying, which sometimes you have to do, it is much, much harder. It becomes far more pushing a boulder up a hill rather than letting a boulder roll down a hill.
Of course, yeah.
So a lot of us being able to scale, especially from 1 to 10 and also from 10 to 20, 100 million, was thinking ahead of how this is going to look like. We are, of course, helped by space is immediately relevant. You don't have anything for a long period of time, but once you have, as we did in 2017, that minimum viable constellation, then you have immediate relevancy all across the world. And so your data product doesn't require a pushing up the hill. It is now globally available. I think we just have to set that background.
You had a constellation, right, at that point, which was so big enough.
Yeah.
Right. How many satellites?
It was about like 30.
30, all right. And so this, with those satellites, you could collect data that nobody else was collecting before?
Correct. That's actually another really, really crucial point of this. It's baked 3 years ahead. When we started the company, I mean, come on. I'm a physicist. I like tinker with electronics and software since being a teenager. You know, you start a space company, there's a lot of people that love space and technology. Yeah. But we had enough of that rational mindset, you know, thanks to my Harvard education, my BCG times, being an investor for a long period of time, that we didn't stop at the technology side, but we really thought about what is unique and solves problems here on Earth for people, for corporations, for countries that can only be done from space. So we were not building something that can be replicated by other means. There is like some very useful...
So it was unique.
Yes, it was unique. Correct.
It was unique and immediate. Did you have immediately some traction in the market for that kind of data?
We did. So we actually went out when we were basically 6 people in a garage and started getting LOIs. We couldn't really get pre-signed contracts because everyone asked us, how many spacecraft have you built? And we said 0. And so that kind of like deflates things because this space is very, very hard. But we got, at some point, we had over 100 LOIs where people said, you have this, I want to be a customer.
Okay, very good. Very, very, very insightful. And so I'm very curious, how did your leadership role evolve as the company scaled from 1 million to 10 million and then from 10 million to 100 million? Very different person, maybe, that, I mean, you're yourself.
Yeah.
Did you have to change? I mean, and what,
Yes.
yeah, what happened?
So I don't think that if you do not change as a person, as your company changes, you will become obsolete much sooner. The company keeps on growing and growing, 2 orders of magnitude over a period of 5 years is very, very hard to keep up with as a person. But your personality has to change. How you approach things, it has to magically change. And I think as a CEO, you have to recognize that when you start a company, about 100% of the complexity of the organization sits in the technology. And that's pretty much universal. It doesn't really matter what type of company you start. At the beginning, you are 4 people in a garage. Literally, we were in a grungy garage in San Francisco. And 100% of your complexity sits in the technology. And then even though your technology complexity increases as your organization scales, but your people complexity scales much, much faster. It scales with the factorial of the number of people that you have because those are the number of relationships you have. So as a manager of complexity, which is one of the big tasks of the CEO in my mind, you get to from managing only technology complexity to increasingly managing people complexity.
So you were 6, 7 at the time. Today, how many people are you?
450.
450, and I guess when you were around 10 million, then you got to, if I remember correctly, maybe close to 100.
We were a bit more than 100.
A bit more than 100. And so, but can you maybe give some anecdotes that can illustrate how your leadership style had to change in those 2 periods?
So I think early on, because the company is so small, you are very, very much a hub with people around you organized as spokes. And that scales to too large a number in all companies, right? You should say 5 or 6 people is maximum, but then you often end up actually in situations where you have 10, 15 people that are direct spokes to you. And a lot of the communication flow happens through you as the middle. And it was a very, very conscious decision and verbalized to everyone else. It's like, guys, we need to change this from a hub with spokes to a web with a spider in the middle, so to speak, right? I always didn't use the word spider, but more a trampoline jumper, right? Where everyone around you has a strong network with each other, and I am, basically the one that can jump up and down, and I can see if there are, frays in the net, and then I can go there and try to fix it. But that was a distinct change from a hub and spokes to a web of the next layer that is deeply interconnected by itself, with me operating, with the phenomenal support of that web.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I wonder how similar or dissimilar it is to the organization at NVIDIA, because I know that Jensen Huang has over 40 direct reports, but it's going to be webbed under and well connected in order to operate. Otherwise, that would be complex. How did you approach hiring? Talking about people and team composition, you have all these first hires as you go from 1 to 10 million, and then from 10 to 100 million. Well, different types of people. Also, maybe because you have different type of access to finance, and then you can maybe afford different kinds of people. Maybe not in your case. What can you tell us about that?
So I was fortunate that I had come up through a lot of very, very people-centric organizations. When you think about, the epitome of high energy physics, CERN, right? When you think about, some of the schools that I was fortunate enough to go to, Wall Street, the top consulting companies, they all recognize that it's driven by their people side. And so they build very, very exquisite recruiting strategies. And so I had the privilege of going through that, experiencing that, and having like a vision for that. And then I was, as you recall, I was a career coach for Harvard for over 2 decades. So I had a lot of pre-experience with how do you think about hiring, and what are like the dimensions that you want to hire alongside. And for us, it was always on one hand the technical skill, what you're getting done, and on the other side, how you're getting things done. So from day one, we had a big focus on those 2 dimensions. And that never really changed. What does change is the risk appetite of people that you can attract. As the organization is full of promise in the future, with very little to show for right now, you are looking for people that have a high appetite for risk, which is easier on the engineering side. It's hard on the sales side because it's like, I have nothing to sell. I'm a salesperson, I want to go out and sell stuff, right? And it's really hard on your support functions. Your lawyers, your accountants, your HR professionals, they are by their makeup very often on a different spot on the risk spectrum. And so as the company grows, you can round out the diversity of the team with people with different amounts of willingness to take risk that early on you're not able to do.
Thank you. I think it's super insightful as well. So now coming to one of the core concepts that I wanted to hear your thoughts about. How did you manage the cultural transformation from a purely engineering-driven culture that's really dead focused on making a very hard product a reality? Even if you're in software, it can be hard. In the case of Peter, it's software and hardware. So morphing that culture, like almost 100% engineering driven, to a sales-driven culture. Some people call it meat-eating culture that you just talked about a moment ago. How do you make that change?
So I think I want to come back to what I said earlier, Jerome. How you make this happen is like baked in 3 years before it happens. So for example, when we went out and looked for engineers, we had a certain vision of how the culture inside the company has to look like. And so we were looking for engineers that are unusually extrovert and communicative and reaching out to other people and connecting with them. The archetype that sometimes people depict of like an engineer with like headphones and blinders sitting in a dark corner by themselves, coding away. Those were people that didn't really populate Spire much. So you start by saying, okay, this is where we want to go. We set out like the 6 values that drive the company, right? We had like a mission of what the company is about very, very early on. And so you bake that, okay, we have to sell stuff way before you actually needed to do it. And then the way you do it is like you just keep on adding to your mix people that are salespeople. You add in people that are marketing people that then augment. And then because you have, let's say, set the stage, even though your engineers are not going to go out and like become salespeople suddenly, it is not as foreign a concept. And I mean, I really have to say, like the people that are engineers in Spire, their desire to understand business is phenomenal. And they are really like always have and continue to today lean into trying to understand it, recognizing that it is it's a different language. A salesperson and like a hardware engineer, it's a different language. But by pre-selecting the setup, the setting, you make yourself much more likely to have an easier transition into, now we have to not just create the product, now we have to be sustainably creating the product, which means we have to sell it so that we can use the customer money to keep on building great product.
Super insightful. Thank you, Peter. But getting maybe a little bit further, the DNA, I understand the DNA was not, in your case, like 100% engineer, traditional engineering. It was engineering, but open to the business world and all the concepts and to networking. But you still didn't have, a roster of, highly experienced salespeople from the get-go. So there was still, I guess, a time where you had to get into that new phase. And so how did that happen? You just hired the people and they seamlessly integrated, just like that, or?
Pretty much.
Oh, wow.
Think of it as like a puzzle.
Yeah.
Like, if you design a puzzle with straight edges on the outside because you're just thinking of engineering, and then you build your puzzle and your straight edges, and then it suddenly says like, oh, now I need another puzzle, then you have a problem because then you need to take away some of the straight edges to fit in your sales puzzle. But if you design it from the beginning that the engineers are not like a straight edge at the end, but like an open API.
Yes.
Maybe it's a bit rusty, maybe you need to file a little bit around, but it's open, then you can just plop your salespeople there, and you need to hire the right salespeople. Like if you hire someone who has no interest in engineering, right, now that's gonna be hard, right? But if you hire someone who likes a technical product, has sold a technical product, right, they're gonna enjoy the conversation with the engineers, then you just keep on building your much, much bigger puzzle. It's in the design from the start that I think helps you a lot.
Super, super. And so what were the biggest operational challenges in scaling from $1 million to 10 million and then to 100 million in revenues? And how did you address those challenges?
So I think you're going to be quite surprised by this. For us, the biggest one is on the systems that support a much, much larger number of customers. So it's CRM, it's accounting, it's booking, it's all of those systems that track when you go from 5 customers where you literally know every single one of them and their spouses and their kids and where they live and everything else, to suddenly you got 800 customers in 62 countries. The underlying systems, literally from how do you track that your customers pay you? How do you track that you sent them a bill? How do you track that you have talked to them?
Across so many jurisdictions. And the compliance, the tax compliance.
All of that, right. It's literally the biggest operational challenges, I would say, that we continue to feel, and that we are, as you go from 100 to $1 billion, it's like the same story all over again, is like having the robustness of the underlying systems to track all of the activity that is happening and track the interfaces that are happening.
So that should be easy for you because you're a data company. And this is about managing data.
But it's about the people side as well.
Right.
Think about it. When you have 5 customers, you don't have salespeople, marketing people, customer success people, sales engineers.
So you need to scale both.
You need to break that block of activities that with 5 customers a salesperson does. You got a salesperson and she's prospecting. She's finding the customer. She's talking to the customer. She's helping them understand the product. She's then, helping them onboard the product, then integrate it into their systems. And then she's keeping tabs on them, upselling them, making sure that they're successful. And then suddenly that doesn't work when you have 800 customers. So you have to break out all these functions into people, into individuals that then need to talk with each other. But not just in one location, because our product immediately was global. So across 3 time zones, which is why we set up in 3 time zones. So you go from one individual that is doing that for 5 customers to 40 individuals in 3 different time zones, breaking up this process chain, and they have to talk with each other.
Or the orchestration,
People, complexity.
Yeah.
That's the difficulty. It's the people complexity.
And so, I mean, now with hindsight, what would you have done differently compared to what you've done and been through?
I think the biggest mistakes that we made is always on the people side. Like not bringing in the right person at the right point in time, but more often not recognizing when the fit for purpose of a skill set, desire, aspirations of an individual for the requirements of the organization were not there anymore. Because that's always a very, very difficult thing. You know, you forge these strong relationships, especially early on, with people that you work often.
So some of the people, it's not a hiring problem, but for some of the people that were in the org before, and with the tremendous evolution of the firm, they didn't scale, they didn't grow as much as they should have in order to keep up, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Is that a failure from the organization to support them in their change, or in some cases it was an issue that they were in their comfort zone and didn't want to change?
It's both, right? And I even want to phrase it as not necessarily as like they didn't want to change as if it's a negative, right? One of the design criteria that we made early on is that we are not an up or out culture. So there are very, very successful companies where if you don't make it to the next level in about 18 months, you'll literally get fired. And they're extremely successful. I always believe that, especially in a sustainable enterprise that is like producing something, those kind of cultures generally work more in service organizations, that someone can make a choice for themselves. This is like, this is the level that I want to work on. And I much rather grow my muscles in the gym and learn a new language rather than grow in my managerial capabilities or in my technical capabilities as an individual. And that's a personal choice that could be for a number of reasons. And we want it to be a place where people can be excellent at their level, but not required. Have the option, have the support, have the training, but not required to. And you'll be surprised how many people embrace that concept. There's been substantially more personal development money in terms of coaches, degrees, that I have offered to people that people actually subscribe to and taken up.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's okay.
I think it's okay too. Yeah.
I think it's
perfectly. I understand. It's but as long as they have they need to have the options.
Yes,
and
100%.
then fostering that culture of in a way, initiative to go and get what you need in order to grow, right? Yeah.
And we certainly made mistakes there. I'm very certain that there are people that we didn't actually pay enough attention to their needs, that we didn't have, especially when you grow, it comes back to this people complexity. When there's like 5 of you in management, everyone knows each other and you can cover for each other. When you got 50, you don't know everyone anymore, right?
Oh, sure.
And not everyone is going to bring every single day the same level of awareness to it, of like how to help their people grow. So we certainly, I think, made mistakes there as well.
Now let's turn to something a little bit hot these days, AI. I want to ask you, Peter, what you thought about AI as a subject generally, but more specifically, how relevant is AI as a tool for your firm and for Earth observation, and how you can implement that into your long-term roadmap.
Yeah. Let's take a step back, right?
Yes.
When when we started the company, I have been following space for a long period of time, always with this vision of like, how can we leverage space to improve life on Earth? I never wanted to be an astronaut. I'll probably take a vacation on the moon if it's available, but I didn't want to like work in space. But thinking about space improving life on Earth was always very core to me. But for the longest time, there was no change in capability. And it wasn't until an event in 2009 where it was all about exponential change, singularity, something that I think you and I share in common, like thinking about exponential change, that there was a statement from someone saying like, okay, space is moving there. And then, I got my degree, and then I found that underlying exponential law, the equivalent of Moore's law, working in the space industry. Moore's law
is called Platzer law, right?
Some people have called it that, yes. So Moore's law is 2 times capability every 2 years. Platzer's law, so to speak, is 5 times capability every 10 years. It's about this, it's a little bit faster than Moore's law, but it's generally speaking, you can think about it, it's very, very similar. And so we predicted what capabilities will be, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years out. And it was clear that at those capability levels, you will be able to solve massive problems. Now, I've also been a data nerd ever since being a kid. So it was clear that we will be a data company. Now, then we used a concept from my investment management days, where there is a statement, the trend is your friend. So you wanted to have, or sometimes people call it, the rising tide lifts all boats. So you wanted to be in that kind of environment. So we looked for what are massive global trends. And the one that we identified and believed in and rallied behind as a mission is the impact of climate change on human activity on Earth. But then we also looked, what are additional supporting trends that can help a data company leveraging space to improve life on Earth? And one of them was literally now, 13 years ago, the identification of AI, machine learning, and deep learning as becoming an exponentially improving story. Because even though we now think like, oh my God, GPT-3 came out overnight, you could actually track for many, many years the improvements that are following an exponential law, just like you could track, CPUs per square inch, or you can, track, download bandwidth from small spacecraft, or qubits on computers. They all follow exponential laws. And AI and machine learning was, for us, one of those. Because what AI and machine learning is, it's basically a exponentially improving mining equipment. Think about a gold mine. 2,000 years ago, the Romans digging out some gold on the ground. If you go there today with modern mining equipment, you'll find literally a shit ton more gold because you have better equipment. And that's what AI machine learning is.
And so you were saying, thanks to Platzer's law, you're actually able to collect, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more data than you were doing just a few years ago.
Yes.
But at the same time, not only are you able to collect, but you're able to make sense out of it, right?
What AI and machine learning does, it is moving the power from those that have access to supercomputers to those that have access to super data. Because it's reducing the cost of computation 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold. But then you still, you have basically a super fast, super cheap computer called an AI model, but without the data, it's useless. So all the benefit is now derived from those that have access to data that no one else has, which was one of the founding principles of Spire. We collect data that is only and exclusively available from a constellation in space.
So here in this case, is it in terms of the models, is it mainly deep learning, machine learning, or are you to some extent also able to harness the power of LLMs to some degree, or not yet?
So there are different areas in the company that use different types of models, right? So we use, ML/DL in kind of like predicting what is going to happen, which is the second stage, right? But we use generative AI models anywhere from decision-making tools to marketing situations. We use LLMs in like how we interact with our customers. So we always looked at AI as a predictable trend in capability that will replace certain types of activities and capabilities on an exponential curve at some point in time. And we considered it a supportive trend to the Spire business empire. Again, the quarter is baked 3 years before it happens.
Yeah, yeah. And that makes me actually think about, also about the compute and what's going on these days with the DVX, the NVIDIA DVX, now exaflop computing on a rack, something that was clearly on the roadmap. But I'm very curious, and you don't have to answer that, about the kind of impact it's going to have on weather modeling just in the next 2 to 3 years. It should be mind-boggling what we're able to make sense out of all of the data.
Yeah. We've been flying a teraflop NVIDIA computer for 3 years. We were the first one to launch that kind of computing capability on orbit. Capable of just crunching large amounts of numbers, but also to run actual models because they had 256 GPUs on board.
So compute, here in this case, weather is just one of the most complex systems out there.
Yeah.
And so the higher the compute, the more sophisticated the compute, the more we're going to be able to actually extract insights. Right?
Yes, but what has changed is that in the past, you needed to run this supercomputer, this compute, every single hour, which is insanely expensive. Yeah. And I remember conversations with people early on that said, I can calculate how much money you need to spend on computers. And I always said, guys, we got this. Because I knew the cost curve of compute was much steeper than people assumed. And then I knew this AI thing is coming. And I was arguing with people in the weather industry that said, AI is never going to do anything for weather prediction. But I could just see it. And I think one of the things that has helped us is my belief in exponential laws are happening, and they are not intuitive.
They're not intuitive.
You cannot grasp them with you. You have to put it in a spreadsheet. I was thinking about that
as you spoke. I was just thinking, this is so not intuitive, and so this is beyond exciting what you're saying. We're going to get deeper in terms of the understanding of weather in the next 2, 3, 5 years than we've ever done in the history of mankind.
100%. And what is happening, that massive compute power is now used once to train the model. Yeah. And then to run the model is basically free. Just to give people a sense here, we have been running government-level weather prediction for a while. The only private company that we knew of that has been doing this for a while, right? Which meant massive amount of compute costs, like tens of thousands of core hours, right? Running on an ongoing basis. Every single weather prediction taking hours and hours. We're just now using a model. Similar level, actually, in certain instances, better prediction that is not running in hours, it's not running in minutes, it's running in less.
Wow.
The training itself, of course, takes a long time, but once it is trained, it is done. And the more access to unique data you have that no one else in the world has, the better your model in the first place. But then the model is still stupid unless you feed it with current, up-to-date, real-time data. So the more relevant, up-to-date, real-time data you have, the more relevant for your customers the output is.
The value, what you're saying is the value of your data is actually increasing.
100%. And that was always, again, thinking about how do you set up an enterprise where the trend is your friend. As much as possible, thinking ahead of what will need to happen that you can scale this and you can keep going, and trying to think this 3, 4, 5, 6 years ahead, and identifying exponential trends where you just not try to intuitively grasp what it's going to be, you just type it into a spreadsheet. It's you can put an exponential in a spreadsheet, everyone can do that, right? But you have to recognize that you're not going to be intuitively able to grasp that. And then trust that your math is right.
Yeah. Well, couldn't have expected what you just said. It's really super inspiring. So maybe last question, and you already gave one answer in terms of the kinds of financial impact that you can expect for your firm, but more broadly, Earth observation, of the potential impact of AI on company financials. Is it going to bring new sources of revenues? Is it going to grow the stickiness of customers? Is it going to decrease the cost of doing what you do?
The biggest opportunity is more insight out of the data. You just have better
At a
mining
lower
equipment.
cost.
At a lower cost, yes.
Yeah.
You know, I think generally we try to, with our products, try to help the cost of companies to operate. And we have a threat that is increasing almost exponentially for our customers, which is climate change and global security, right? So that's very, you know, I mean, I think from a company perspective, helpful. From a human individual perspective, not so helpful, right? But you have an increasing pain creator on the other side, and you have now exponentially increasing abilities to decrease, mitigate, remove that pain, be that from climate change and the impact of climate change, or be that from global security. And AI is one of those phenomenal tools that allows us to have more insights, more relevance, more specificity for our customers, saving them more time or money, and in many instances, allowing them to generate more revenue.
More revenues. Well, thank you very much, Peter. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's been a really fascinating interview. A lot of insights also for all the scale-ups out there. So if you like this video, please give us a thumb up and follow us for more.